What turns certain behaviors into a clinical concern is time and what we call pervasiveness. Pervasiveness means across the board. How difficult has this trigger impacted your daily life? So, for somebody who may have a propensity for sadness or has really been traumatized by a love that's lost or a breakup, the things to look for are any significant quick behavioral changes. Are you sleeping more? Are you sleeping less? Are you eating more? Are you eating less? Are you tearful, crying? There's normal, or I hate that word, expected reactions that should come with something sad, right? The
Right.
range of human emotions means we should be sad over something
Mhm.
as heartbreaking as a love loss.
Mhm.
But if it becomes 2 weeks or more, 2 weeks seems to be the criteria for most mood disorders. So if you're struggling with concentration, tearfulness, um, real fatigue, because breakups particularly cause enormous stress on the heart, um, physical aches and pains. And if you can't get to work or you can't get to school or you're foggy and can't make decisions or things that were easy are now difficult, and it's going on not only at home, not only at work or school, it's happening in the car, it's happening in the supermarket, it's happening in lots of places that essentially this is kind of the shroud of sadness has really kind of weighed itself on you. So that's the time, that 2 weeks or more and across the board. If you're only crying at night before you go to sleep, yes, that's really hard. But if you're functional everywhere else and you can kind of move forward and you're not having any difficulties or bumps in the road, that may not be a clinical concern. But
Mm.
when we start to hear, I crying at work, I was in the car, I can't sleep at night, I'm up pacing, it's a month now, what's going on?
Right.
That's when we start to say, how about we look at this a little bit more in depth?
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, interesting because I remember going through my hardest breakup and trying to go to work and thinking, "I'll be alright, I can hold it together." And then just completely falling apart at work and
Mhm, mhm.
actually, like, physically not being able to keep it in, and I rang my boss in tears and just was like, "I'm
Oh,
I'm really sorry, I thought I could keep it together, but I can't." And she's like,
oh,
"Just wrap this up and then go home." Because I was like, "I'm
oh,
no."
but that's so wonderful that your boss was supportive like that.
Well, we were in a setting where I really needed to have it together, and it was like it was definitely not appropriate for me to fall apart, but I didn't do it in front of the client. I, backed out and but so you're talking about in that, like, scenario, like, for me, I was able to contain it and then fall apart on the phone and then go home, but, like,
Mm,
you're
mm.
talking about, like, falling apart in front of the client and not being able to keep it together at all. Is that
Yes, or even for some people being able to contain it, but knowing that there's an enormous amount of stress and force to hold it together,
right.
and you get through it. You get through your client meeting or your workshop, or you're a teacher teaching the class, whatever it is.
Mhm.
But then there's this, that was so hard. I don't know if I could do it again. And then you do it again.
Right.
So you're kind of white knuckling it or biting the bullet, but
Mm.
the stress of it is really enormous. And that might be something that a mental health professional can help you with. But again, there's a certain grieving period that's
Mm.
very expected.
Yeah.
And,
Interesting. Sorry, go ahead.
no, go ahead, go
No,
ahead.
you go ahead. I was just gonna say it's interesting that it's 2 weeks. I feel like that's not that long.
Well, the behavioral symptoms of depression, when we're looking at symptoms, it's about 2 weeks. But I would say for any significant loss, several months. I would say the trigger of a breakup, divorce, separation, anything where there's a significant loss of a loved one, because a breakup is just as powerful as a death, because it is.
Right.
In many ways, there's an experience of grief and bereavement. So when we're talking about the actual breakup, yes, many months to recover. But if during those months to recover, you're really experiencing a depression whilst that grieving is going on, it's a good time to get some support. Not that that's a bad thing,
Mhm.
but it can turn into something what we call prolonged grief disorder. So, yes, I'm talking about two different things. I'm
Right.
talking about the actual symptoms themselves being consistently there for 2 to 3 weeks, but give yourself some time to grieve because a breakup does require some time.
Mhm.
But if you're finding, and here's where it clashes or intersects, if you're finding you're really struggling with your grief and bereavement and you can't get to work or all the things that we were talking about, there are grief specialists and very expected that some people will struggle because it's very hard for them because it's such a loss. And that's why it's so uniquely different for each person.